The hammer comes down before anyone says a word, not a test swing. Full force, clean and certain, the way a man strikes when he already knows where the metal wants to go. The sound rolls out of the open forge doors and across the competition yard, and for just a moment, one heartbeat, every conversation stops. Then the laughter starts. The old man at the center anvil doesn't look up. He just turns the billet a quarter inch and hits it again. His name is Earl Doss. He is 73 years old. His forge apron is so stained with scale and oil that the original canvas color is anybody's guess. The hammer in his right hand is a 2-pound cross peen with a hickory handle he shaped himself, and the handle is smooth in all the places where a hand goes and rough everywhere else. He has owned it since 1974. He brought it to the Tri-County Bladesmith Championship in Dripping Springs, Texas, in a canvas roll he carried under one arm, the same way he has carried it to every job for the last 49 years. There are 11 other smiths in the yard today. The youngest is 24. The oldest, before Earl registered, was 41. They come from Colorado, from Tennessee, from a shop outside of Bozeman that posts 8,000 followers on social media and sells custom hunters for $900 apiece. Their equipment is worth watching. Propane forges with digital temperature readouts, 200-pound Pettinghouse anvils shipped in from Germany, angle grinders with ceramic belts, aprons from a boutique in Austin that charges $280 for the bib style alone. They have driven here in trucks with logos on the doors. The competition rules are posted on a plywood board by the registration table. Each smith has 6 hours to produce a complete fixed blade knife, start to finish, judged on geometry, edge retention, fit, and finish, and what the head judge, a retired farrier from Kerrville named Dale Suggs, calls the soul of the work. Edge retention testing means the blade gets clamped and run across a certified hemp rope bundle. Fit and finish means there is a magnifying glass involved. Soul of the work means Dale holds it, runs his thumb across the spine, and either nods or he doesn't. The prize is $5,000 and a plaque. And Earl Doss, according to the man on his left, should not be here. The man on his left is named Cody Briggs. He is 31 years old, sponsored by a steel supplier out of Dallas, and his knife sells at a table in the back of the yard for between $1,200 and $1,800, depending on the handle material. He is good. He knows he is good. His Instagram page has 140,000 people on it who agree. He has won this competition 3 times in the past 5 years, and his name is on a brass plate on the plaqueboard by the entrance. He looks at Earl the way a rested horse looks at a fence post. When Earl finishes signing his registration card, Cody leans toward the man on his right, a younger bladesmith from Fort Worth named Marcus, and he says it just loud enough to carry, "What category is he in? Antiques?" Marcus laughs. 2 other smiths nearby catch it and laugh too. One of them glances at Earl and then looks away, the way people do when they've joined something they're not entirely proud of. Earl hears it. He caps his pen, tucks the registration card into his shirt pocket, and walks to his assigned station. He sets the canvas roll on the workbench. He unrolls it the way a surgeon unrolls a kit, methodically, without ceremony. Inside, the cross peen, a ball peen backup, 2 files, a hand-stitched leather strop, a small tin of oil, and 3 pieces of 1084 high-carbon steel bar stock that he selected himself from a supplier he has bought from since the man's father ran the business. He lifts the first bar and holds it at an angle to the morning light, checks the grain of the steel the way another man might check the weather, sets it down, lights his coal forge with newspaper and a pine splint, waits. The propane forges around him ignite with a button and a hiss. Digital readouts tick upward. Within 4 minutes, 3 smiths are already hammering. Cody Briggs has his first billet at temperature and is working the profile on a 130-pound Pettinghouse that he keeps polished. The clang of his work is heavy and confident. He hits hard and he hits fast, the kind of speed that comes from a man who is also thinking about the clock. Earl's coal forge takes 11 minutes to reach working temperature. Dale Suggs, the head judge, stands near the water barrel and watches Earl wait. He has been the head judge at this competition for 9 years. He has seen a lot of things at this table. He watches the old man's face and he doesn't say anything. At minute 11, the coal in Earl's forge glows from orange to a clean, even yellow-white at the center. Earl takes the 1084 bar with his tongs, sets it in the fire at the exact angle where the heat is most uniform, and watches the color climb the steel the way a careful man watches the tide come in. When it reaches a bright orange-yellow, not red, not white, orange-yellow, the color of a late August sunset over the hill country, he pulls it, sets it on the anvil, and begins. He doesn't move fast. He moves with a kind of deliberate precision that doesn't fit with speed at all, and yet somehow the steel does what he wants before it loses heat. Full working blows first, to consolidate the grain, then drawing blows angled, pulling the steel into length. He rotates the bar every 2 to 3 hits with a turn of the wrist so small it looks like a reflex. The profile of a blade begins to appear in the first heat, the way a face appears in a fog. Faint, then certain. Marcus walks past his station, glances over, does a small double take. Earl doesn't notice. Or if he notices, it doesn't change anything in his hands. By the second heat, the bevel geometry is roughed in. It is not a rushed geometry, the kind that looks right until you lay a straight edge against it and find the wobble. The taper from spine to edge is clean and even, pulled by hammer control rather than ground by machine. This is a thing that takes years to learn. Most modern bladesmiths grind their bevels because grinding is faster and the result is more consistent. What Earl is doing, hammer forging a flat grind with a 2-pound cross peen, is a technique that most of the smiths in this yard have read about but never practiced. After the third heat, he closes his eyes for about 40 seconds, stands at the anvil with his eyes closed and his hands at his sides, just breathes. Cody Briggs watches this from his station and turns to Marcus and says, at a normal volume, "Is he sleeping?" A few people laugh. Dale Suggs does not laugh. He has seen that before. Not often, but he has seen it. A man who has done something long enough to have a conversation with it inside his own head. He steps a little closer to Earl's station. What Dale does not know yet, but will know before this day is over, is what Earl Doss did before he was a bladesmith. From July 1968 through March 1970, Corporal Earl Doss served with the 3rd Marine Division's Force Reconnaissance Company in I Corps, South Vietnam. He ran 22 deep penetration patrols into terrain that does not appear by name in most history books. He was in the Quang Tri province when Khe Sanh was still a name that made men quiet at tables. He received a Navy Commendation Medal with Combat V for a patrol in November 1969, during which, with a teammate's radio destroyed and the team's position compromised, he constructed a functional directional antenna from salvaged wire and a section of bamboo and brought in a fire support grid that extracted his 6-man team from a hillside they should not have survived. He never talked about the medal. He wore it once at a funeral and put it back in a box. When he came home from Vietnam in 1970, he had no trade. He had a draft notice, a discharge paper, and a pair of hands that had learned to be useful. A man in his hometown of Comfort, Texas, named Roy Siebert, ran a general blacksmith shop in a converted horse barn and needed help with the coal and the cleaning. Earl showed up at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday. Roy didn't ask him anything except whether he could swing a hammer. Earl said he reckoned so. Roy handed him a 2-pound cross peen and pointed at the fire. Earl has been swinging that same weight of hammer, on that same style of handle, for 54 years. Roy Siebert died in 1981 and left Earl the shop, the tools, and the coal forge that had been in the barn since 1923. Earl is still using that forge. He upgraded the firebox lining in 1998 and replaced the tuyere in 2011, and that is the extent of its renovation. Nobody in the competition yard knows any of this. By hour 2, the blade's profile is complete, and the primary bevel is set. Earl is now at the file stage. He clamps the blade in a wooden vise he made himself from oak scraps and begins to work the geometry with a 10-inch Nicholson bastard cut. The sound is different from the grinders around him, softer, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Other smiths have moved to their belt grinders by now. The yard is loud with the scream of ceramic belts and the smell of hot steel. Earl's station is an island of a different century. 3 of the younger smiths have drifted past his station in the last 30 minutes. They stop for just a moment, watching the file work, and then move on. One of them, a young woman from Albuquerque named Petra, who has been smithing for 4 years and placed 3rd here last year, stops longer than the others. She watches Earl's file angle, watches the consistency of the strokes. Then she goes back to her station and adjusts her angle on the grinder without quite knowing why. At the 3-hour mark, Dale Suggs calls a water break. Everyone steps back from the forge stations. Earl walks to the water barrel, fills a tin cup, drinks it standing up, and looks at the sky the way a man looks at the sky when he is checking the weather and also not checking the weather. Cody Briggs stands near the cooler with Marcus and another smith from Colorado. He has been watching Earl's progress with the slow, dawning discomfort of a man who expected a joke and found something else. The billet Earl started with is now unmistakably a blade, and the geometry is— Cody looked when he walked past. The geometry is correct, more than correct. He doesn't say this out loud. What he says out loud is, "Old school points for effort, but wait till we get to heat treat." Heat treatment is where Earl's approach would, in Cody's estimation, finally fall apart. No kiln, no digital temperature controller, no Parks 50 quench oil with a thermostat keeping it at exactly 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Earl heats by eye, quenches in a bucket of oil he keeps warm with a submerged can of hot coals in the bottom. Cody learned bladesmithing in a shop with a Paragon kiln, and he trusts the numbers. Numbers don't lie. But there is a thing that Roy Siebert told Earl in the summer of 1972, when Earl was still spending more time cleaning coal than forging, and it is a thing that Earl has never forgotten. Roy said, "The kiln tells you where the steel is. Your eye tells you where it wants to go. Don't ever let a machine replace the second thing." Earl finishes his water, goes back to his station. He heats the blade for normalization. 3 cycles, decreasing heat, letting the grain structure settle from the trauma of the hammer work. He does this slowly and without checking a clock. Between cycles, he sets the blade on a fire brick and watches the color fade in the steel, that slow retreat from orange to black, and his eyes read it the way an old reader reads a familiar language. Cody's kiln has beeped. His blade is in the quench. He checks the temperature readout on the oil, 118 degrees, 2 degrees low. He shrugs it off. Earl brings his blade to hardening temperature on the 4th heat cycle of the afternoon. He pulls it from the fire and, in the flat midday light of the Texas yard, holds it so that the magnetic test ball he carries, a small neodymium disc on a length of wire, old-fashioned, the kind of field-expedient temperature check Roy taught him, swings close to the steel and does not pull. Non-magnetic. Correct. He drops the blade into the oil bucket in one smooth motion, edge down, no rocking, no hesitation. A sound comes out of the bucket. A low hiss, sustained even. The sound of steel becoming what it was always going to be. He holds the blade still in the oil for 12 seconds, pulls it, looks at the color under the scale, a uniform gray-silver with no patches, no hot spots showing. He sets it on the brick, walks to the side table and pours himself a second cup of water. Petra, from her station, has been watching. She is holding a temperature probe she has not inserted anywhere. She sets it down on her bench and just watches Earl move. There are 90 minutes left when Earl begins the final finish work. He has a piece of flat sandpaper, 220 grit, glued to a scrap of plate glass, and he starts drawing the blade across it in long, even strokes, cutting the scratches down through the grits the way a slow river cuts through stone. 220, 320, 400, 600. He works each grit until the scratches from the previous grit are entirely gone, and then he moves on. There is no shortcut in this. A man who tries to skip a grit number is a man who will see a ghost of the coarser scratches in the finished blade, and the magnifying glass will find it, and Dale Suggs will find it behind the magnifying glass. Earl does not skip grits. He is at 800 grit when Cody Briggs finishes his blade and sets it on the judging table. It is a beautiful knife. 5.5 inches of blade, flat grind, desert ironwood handle with stainless pins, lined up with a perfection that reflects the afternoon light like a mirror. Cody steps back from it and crosses his arms, and there is a satisfaction in his posture that he has earned. It is a genuinely excellent knife. He looks at Earl's station. Earl is still sanding. "He's not gonna finish," Cody says, to no one in particular, and there is something uncomfortable in his voice now that wasn't there this morning. It is not quite certainty, but Earl finishes. With 11 minutes to spare, he moves from 800 to 1,000 grit, then lifts the blade and draws it down the leather strop 5 times, long, clean, light-pressure strokes, and sets the knife on the judging table. It does not look like Cody's knife. Cody's knife looks like something from a catalog, clean, symmetrical, photographable. The handle is museum quality. Earl's knife looks like something that was always going to be a knife, even when it was still a bar of steel in a canvas roll under a man's arm. The blade taper from handle to tip is fluid and purposeful, with a slight distal taper in the thickness that gives the knife balance in the hand. The finish is not mirror polished. It is a fine hand-rubbed finish, 1,000 grit, with the lines all running in one direction the way water runs downhill. The edge, when Dale Suggs runs his thumbnail at 90 degrees across it and feels the drag, has a geometry to it, a convex micro-bevel almost invisible, the kind that forest rangers and hunting guides prize because it rolls instead of chipping when it hits a knot. Dale picks up the knife, holds it, runs his thumb across the spine, nods once, slowly, the way a man nods when a thing is exactly what he needed. The hemp rope test is done on a bench vise rig with a certified rope bundle and a count of slicing passes. The competition standard is 40 clean passes through 3/4-inch hemp before the edge shows degradation. Most competition knives get to 60, 70 passes if they're well finished. Cody's knife, it is an excellent knife, reaches 84 passes. He knows this is a good score. He watches from the side with his arms still crossed. Earl's blade reaches 104 passes. The rope bundle is showing wear before the edge is. Dale sets down the clipboard. There is a long pause in the yard that is not a gap in time, but a gap in certainty, the moment when everyone present recalibrates what they thought they knew. One of the younger smiths lets out a breath. Marcus, from Fort Worth, says quietly, 104. Just the number. Just to hear it out loud. Cody's arms drop from his chest. He looks at the rope bundle. He looks at the blade. He looks at Earl, who is standing to the side with his hands at his seams, his forge apron still on, looking at nothing in particular and not looking like a man who is waiting to be congratulated. Dale Suggs picks up the microphone that gets used for the award announcement, and he does a thing he has not done in 9 years of judging this competition. He steps away from the table first and walks to Earl's station. He stands in front of Earl and he puts the microphone down to say this, says it just to the man. "Where'd you come from, son?" Earl looks at him. "Comfort, Texas." "Where'd you learn this?" "Man named Roy Siebert. Went to his shop in 1970. Never really left." Dale nods. "Before that?" Earl doesn't answer immediately. He looks at the forge, the old coal forge with the 1923 firebox and the replaced tuyere, and then he says, "Kaisan, Quang Tri, places where you either learn what your hands can do or you find out they can't do enough." And that is when it goes quiet in the yard. not the silence of boredom or distraction, the silence of a room recalibrating. A few people put the math together. 1970, Vietnam, the particular stillness in the man that has no self-promotion in it, and something shifts in the air above the Texas hardpan. Dale picks up the microphone and announces the scores. He announces the edge retention test results and reads the number aloud, 104. Then he announces the overall winner of the Tri-County Bladesmith Championship, and he announces it facing Earl Doss. The applause starts as a few hands and becomes the whole yard inside of 5 seconds. Petra from Albuquerque claps hardest of anyone, which surprises her and also does not surprise her at all. Cody Briggs stands at the edge of the group. He is not clapping yet. He is looking at the man he called an antique this morning, at the apron that is stained with 54 years of work, at the hands holding the cross-peen hammer in the canvas roll being tucked back under one arm. He is doing the accounting that comes to a person when they realize they spoke before they listened. He walks over. He doesn't lead with a speech. He extends his right hand, and when Earl shakes it, Cody keeps hold of it for a moment and says, low and direct, the way a man speaks when he means to say the real thing. I was wrong about you. I said something ignorant, and I'm sorry for it. Earl looks at him. There is no anger in his face, and there is no satisfaction either, the way there would be if the day had been about proving something. The look on Earl's face is the same look he had when he was checking the grain of the steel at 8 in the morning, attentive, quiet, already moving to the next thing. You make a good knife, Earl says, and that is all he says. He takes the $5,000 check from Dale, folds it once, and puts it in the same shirt pocket where he keeps his registration card and a small photograph he has carried in his wallet since 1970. A photograph of Roy Siebert standing in front of the Horse Barn Forge in Comfort, Texas, holding a hand-forged draw knife and squinting into the summer light, looking like a man who believes the work in front of him is exactly as important as any work on earth. The hammer comes down. Earl Doss Pax,